So thank you all for joining us today for a discussion of MedTech patient engagement in early clinical phases of medical device and diagnostic development. My name is Bill Schulz, and I'm a consultant at Alira Health, an international patient-centric and technology-enabled healthcare advisory firm. It's my pleasure to introduce today's panel that we have convened from our patient engagement think tank, a year-long collaboration between Alira Health, MedTech, the Center for Patient Advocacy Leaders, and participants of the MedTech industry. I'm thrilled to introduce our panelists, who each bring diverse perspectives to our discussion today. The panelists are participating today in their own capacity and not as representatives of their respective employers. Any statements or opinions that they may share are their own and not necessarily representative of their employers or affiliates. Our first panelist today is Amye Leong, an internationally recognized patient advocacy leader, health communications and policy strategist, and patient-centric and patient partner researcher. She is the president and CEO of Health Motivation, a health education and advocacy consulting firm in Santa Barbara, California. She has also advised the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, Critical Path, the National Institutes of Health, the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, and the Agency for Health Research and Quality on topics such as the integration of patient voice into research development and outcomes. She has also served as Director of Strategic Relations for the United Nations-endorsed Bone and Joint Decade, the Global Alliance for Musculoskeletal Health, where she I'm getting an echo. Oh, okay, all right, I'll continue. Where she led education programs and facilitated collaborations among leaders worldwide to address the epidemic of musculoskeletal disabilities. Amye brings a lifetime of experience advocating for patients from the rheumatology community and beyond to the panel, and we are thrilled that she's here with us today. Our next panelist is Stephanie Reffey, who has focused her career advocating for patients. As Patient Advocacy and Alliance Relations Director at Exact Sciences, Stephanie strives to cultivate value-based relationships with patients, patient advocates, healthcare providers, and scientists. She also serves as a board member for the Side Out Foundation, a nonprofit breast cancer research organization working to improve outcomes for those living with metastatic breast cancer. Through her current roles at Exact Sciences and Side Out, as well as her former role as Vice President of Data Science and Impact at the Susan G. Komen organization, which strives to end breast cancer through funding research, community health, and advocacy programs, Stephanie has shown dedication to developing, improving, and sustaining patient-centered initiatives. Our third panelist is Annabel DeMaria, who has dedicated her professional life to understanding the patient journey across dozens of disease states to implement strategic efforts to support and advocate on behalf of patients. As Vice President of Patient Engagement at Alira Health, Annabel leads efforts with clinical teams from the MedTech and pharma industries to co-develop clinical trial protocols with patients. She works to apply patient insights into trial protocols, regulatory submissions, HTA assessments, and commercial strategies. She also serves as a hospital volunteer at the Rare Disease Department at the Hospital Clínic de Barcelona, where she serves as a patient representative of the European Alliance of Associations for Rheumatology Working Group on Autoinflammatory Diseases. Before joining Alira Health, Annabel held several roles as communications and patient advocacy manager at Bayer Healthcare, Pfizer, and Novartis. She continues to lead the patient engagement think tank on behalf of Alira Health in collaboration with MedTech and the Center for Patient Advocacy Leaders. Before passing to our panelists, allow me to provide some brief context to the patient engagement think tank. The think tank was convened in September of 2021 to define the role of patient engagement in the medtech industry and to define a playbook that standardizes patient engagement practices throughout the medtech product development lifecycle. Following an initial workshop to identify gaps and opportunities in the lifecycle, 3 workshops were completed representing the clinical, regulatory and market access, and commercialization phases of the product lifecycle. During each workshop, the think tank developed patient engagement activities that could address challenges and realize opportunities. This collaborative effort enabled the development of the playbook for patient engagement in MedTech, which is currently underway. With that, I'm pleased to introduce Stephanie Reffey, who will discuss the findings of the think tank related to the early clinical phases of the MedTech product lifecycle.
Thanks, Bill. As Bill just mentioned, the goal of the patient engagement think tank was to define the role of patient engagement across the medical device and diagnostic lifecycle. Today, we're going to focus specifically on the role of patient engagement in clinical phases. And while I do feel like I'm preaching to the choir a little bit, I want to reiterate why this is important. You can see that during the think tank discussion, we identified many ways that patient engagement benefits clinical trials, including addressing the real shortcomings of existing solutions, facilitating active participation in the process, collecting data that resonates with patients and their families, and resolving real-world unmet needs. Let's talk about some of the ways that patients can get engaged across the clinical process. The think tank envisioned many ways, and when we started this conversation, we started with the research priorities. However, we very quickly realized that understanding the patient and caregiver journey was a key part of this and could really inform the research priorities as well as the rest of the life cycle. So we added phase 0, which you can see on the left. Phase 1 then represents those research priorities that I just mentioned. And while we identified several avenues of patient engagement here, gap analysis was a key point. Getting input from patients and caregivers about the challenges of the patient journey and what the unmet needs really are is so important to developing a meaningful research strategy. From there, patients can help prioritize the unmet needs, match them to the research opportunities, and frequently identify additional data points that could be meaningful to patients, as well as advise on outcomes, facilitating a better trial. Moving to phase 2, this represents patient involvement in research design and planning. The think tank agreed that patient engagement around protocol development was critical, including help with the synopsis, defining the target populations, ensuring diversity across a variety of characteristics, including age, race, gender, and this all feeds into the inclusion-exclusion criteria for the trial as well. Patients also provide valuable information on the risks and benefits of the trial, what a good balance looks like, what would be acceptable, or what would pose a barrier to potential participants. Patients can also add value to the recruitment materials, the informed consent, and the consent process, often helping to ensure that the materials are clear and understandable. Patients also have the ability to draw attention to the practical considerations of a study, things that may not be obvious to the researchers developing the study and that might present a barrier to participation. These are things like travel expenses, mobility issues. Knowing those things up front enables the team to develop a better trial and address them proactively. But patient engagement doesn't end there. We also identified several ways that patients can participate in and support ongoing research and operations, including participating on the steering committee to oversee access, adherence, and how the trial is running. Ongoing communication is another key area for patient involvement. Patients can also participate in the data safety monitoring process to monitor risks and benefits as the trial progresses. And in my opinion, one of the most important ways patients can participate is by sitting in on the investigator meetings. If patients and patient advocacy groups are truly partners in this enterprise, they should have a seat at the table to discuss the daily business of the research. Let's talk a little bit about what the risks and benefits are of patient engagement. So first, let me just say that this slide and these pains and gains reflect the company perspective, but I do think we can draw some relevant information from them. As patients, I think it's helpful to understand that there is lower industry-wide understanding of patient engagement in clinical trials. The MedTech industry is behind the drug development industry on this front, and I'm not even sure we'd say pharma has nailed it yet. However, we also thought that there was recognition that we don't do a great job of integrating the patient journey into clinical trial design currently, and that likely contributes to some recruitment challenges and high dropout rates that we experience. Something that's very easily addressed by engaging patients in the planning process. Also, there's a lack of published evidence around the economic impact of patient engagement. However, while there aren't a lot of data published about this, what is out there has shown that patient engagement in clinical trial design helps reduce the number of amendments needed, often can accelerate recruitment, both of which have tangible benefits. So there are a number of pains, but there are also a number of gains to patient engagement in the clinical setting. But I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Amy because she's going to elaborate on many of these things.
Thank you so much, Stephanie and Bill. Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to join you. I am a patient a person first, a patient second, a patient advocate third, and a patient advocate leader fourth. And I say that with very particular, next slide, please, with very particular reference to the fact that as we look at a structure or a systematic way of doing many things, and certainly patient engagement is one of them, you have to think about the words that we use and how we describe people like you and me who are patients, and maybe you and me who are leaders of patients. And there's a big difference. And so understanding where you want to go, first of all, what you want to do, how you'd like to contribute as a patient, how you as a caregiver would like to contribute as a family member is very, very important. 30 years ago, this opportunity did not exist. 25 years ago, it sort of existed, but only in pockets of places around the world. Today in 2023, let's be realistic, in 2023, the role of patient engagement is showing on the pharmaceutical side that there is much to learn, that there's much even greater benefit to engaging patients. And so, as Stephanie and Bill have shown us so far, is that we still have a long way to go in medical devices. As you well know, medical devices could be anything with very large companies that are more in the tech space than the medical space. It could be a joint replacement. It could be a shunt. It could be any kind of medical device that's inserted into your body. And as you know, and probably as a patient, as I know about shunts. I know about PICC lines. I know about joint replacement surgeries because I've had 20 of them and more. It's this kind of experience that helps the industry that you choose to share your expertise with, that makes all the difference. The different kinds of titles that you see under my name there are actual examples of titles of organizations and member names of advisory groups that exist in the area of patient engagement. So there is more infrastructure being included, and that's a good thing for us. I want to talk to you about two particular examples of how you as a patient can get involved. And I'm going to give different aspects of these two examples because not any one entity has it all, does it all. And so it depends on how new or experienced the company might be, the industry might be, and you as patients might be in the subject area. I'll give an example. Rheumatology is my subject area. I happen to have rheumatoid arthritis over 30 years and have had over 20 different joint replacements. I'm very conversant with any level of orthopedic surgeon to talk about my condition. I know what a tibia and a femur are and those kinds of things. That may not seem like much to you, but it's a lot when we sit with our research scientists, with our clinician, and show our enthusiasm about wanting to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And that's how I look at it. I want to be part of the solution. And I know that we need more people like you and me to join that evolution of a solution, if you will. Evolution of a solution, not bad. So in OMERACT, Outcomes Measures in Rheumatology Clinical Trials, this is a very collaborative international organization of different scientists in rheumatology research, so bones and joints. And it's a worldwide group. They started in 1992 of all doctors, all researchers. It was 10 years later that the researchers sat around and said, you know what, something is missing, badly missing from our discourse. And what the executive committee, all medical people, of course, said, we're missing the patients. And that was in 2001. By 2002, some of us patient research partners, PRPs, received an invitation to participate every 2 years with this very large, illustrious body of researchers in like 35 or 40 different topics from MRIs to joint inflammation to how do you know what a flare really is defined as, the kinds of things that researchers and patients want to know about. So the unique thing about OMERACT is that because it was started by patients at the suggestion of researchers, the patients took hold of this and said, okay, we'll never be an MD, a doctor, because we're patients. What can we give to this process that would be helpful to others? And that was a great way to start to look at this. The first thing that we created was a glossary of terms. You can imagine in the field of medicine, and there's a variety of different fields within medicine, that it has different meanings to different people, whether you're a researcher, a clinician, a patient, a hospitalist, an insurance provider, those kinds of things. And so we came up with a glossary of research terms. We started to develop training manuals for patients, testimonials, upcoming events. We even developed a system of process so that patients were reviewing the backgrounds and experiences of other patients to see if they could help in terms of identifying the real skill sets needed. So this gives you an idea of one example in OMERACT, but having some really great educational pieces. This particular second example, and my final example, is on PCORI, Patient-Centered Outcomes Research. It is an independent, federally funded research organization that was started in 2010. And since 2010, it has become the leading organization for presenting, posing, and providing the funding for patient-centered effectiveness studies. There's a lot of words there. Let me see if I can break this down. Patient-centered is you and I, the patients at the center. What's important to us? What's more important to us than other things? Comparative clinical effectiveness is strategy A or strategy B? Which is more effective given maybe the fact that I've had it longer, the disease longer, maybe someone has had it less period of time. So there's a lot of nuances that go into this. So the idea of patient-centered, very, very important. You'll always hear that in any patient engagement conversation. And then comparing clinical effectiveness is really what our research is trying to do. Let's find out which ones and which strategies actually work. It is literally the model right now being used around the world in the area of patient engagement. And it's a good model. It's out of the United States, but we know there will be other iterations even better than that. And my last slide is really talking about personal ways that I have learned that you can, once you've decided you want to engage as a patient and be helpful in a research project, how do you jump into this? Do you just put something on social media? Do you put some ad in Craigslist or something like that? No, not you don't. One way of doing this is really finding out what's going on in your local area. If there's an academic medical center nearby, chances are they're doing research. Pick the subject area or medical device area you're interested in and contact the lead person. Introduce yourself to them. Show them your resume. In fact, have a dynamite cover letter that talks about your interest, your passion in being able to communicate how you feel to potential researchers. That will stir them a great bit. And of course, any skill sets you have that makes you a great team player. There are websites all around, internationally as well, in terms of clinical trials. It doesn't necessarily always stay updated because there's so many trials going on all the time. So you may have to go through academic medical centers. You may have to go through clinicaltrials.gov. You may go to the different medical societies and the patient advocacy groups that exist out there. So there's different ways. The third aspect is really to be assertive. And I say that in all the positive ways that I can say being assertive. I'll be honest with you. I am a fourth generation Asian, Chinese, Californian. Okay. There are so many generations between when my family 4 or 5 generations ago. And the difference between them and me now today is I'm much more American than my great-great-great-grandmother ever was. But at the same token, my sense of assertiveness is I take responsibility for that because I'm an American first. And so being assertive means really trying not to take no for an answer, but at the same time saying, I think I can really help. In fact, I know I can. Can I learn from you? And those are always helpful if you've got doctors, researchers who are your friends and who just really want to tap into your experience. And experience is a type of expertise. Then open yourself up to that because you'll get lots of feedback. The last thing I would say is learn those processes. Like I said, OMRAC has some aspects that are really good. PCORI has other aspects that are very, very good. But there's no one organization, industry, or entity that has done it all and has adapted it in every way possible. So that gives you an idea how complicated it can be. But you know what? As far as I'm concerned, I'm the patient. I'm worth it. I want to find solutions. I want to get rid of pain. And this is your opportunity to do so as well. I hope you'll join us. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Amy. That was fantastic. So I'm the last one in this presentation, and I'm going to try to give you some practical cases that we've been through during the last year. These case studies that I'm going to show you, they've been organized, they've been under Alira Health clients. So what I mean with this is that happened under the environment of the consultancy. However, we thought it could be a very good example on how we could translate all these different items and aspects that Stephanie and Amy brought us through. This first case that we are going to show you, it's on infertility. That company was based in the US. However, because the Spanish market, it is so developed in infertility, we wanted to do the project and to scope the project in 2 different geographies. So that was United States and in Spain. That happened at the end of last year. We got the results at the beginning of this year. And what I would like to explain you about this project is that we had a client who was a biotech company, and they were entering into the infertility space. They were seeking support to enhance the involvement of patients in the clinical development of their product, of course, through the appraisal of an in-depth patient journey. I think that if you remember, Stephanie explained it as at the very beginning, that when you look at the patient journey in drug development, at the very beginning of the clinical phases, ideally, we should set up the patient journey and understand very well from the patient's eyes, what is it, that journey? What are the insights? What are the implications of living with the disease? What is the real burden of the disease? So for this specific case, what we did, the methodology that we used included an initial benchmark through secondary research, but then we did direct patient journey assessments. So we interviewed 10 patients diagnosed with infertility and undergone in vitro fertility at that time with different degrees of treatment success and socioeconomic backgrounds. They were all interviewed. In total, we interviewed these 10 patients in the US, but also 10 patients in Spain. What did it happen? It was very interesting. You would envision that when a woman is passing through this process of infertility, that person would look at success as simply getting pregnant, right? And what it happened as a result of all those interviews is that we understood that those patients were telling us that success didn't just look as getting pregnant. Success did also look as getting more embryos ready for future attempts. And what does this mean for those who are not very familiar with the initial design of a clinical protocol? That meant that in clinical trials, you can design a protocol for you to have one endpoint, so one single goal, let me say, but you can also have some secondary endpoints, as it is called in clinical research. And that's exactly what it happened in here. Our client was able to understand that by inserting the insights of those patients into the clinical trial protocol, we could end up in having more than one endpoint in the trial. Therefore, this specific molecule, which is currently starting phase 1, it's going to evaluate not just the likelihood to get pregnant when you take this medicine, but also the likelihood for having more embryos prepared for future attempts. Imagine how important is this, that for any pharmaceutical or medtech company developing a drug or a medical device, for them to have 2 endpoints in a trial, it is sometimes very difficult to achieve. So getting this secondary endpoint from the patient perspective, it was simply fantastic in the sense that we could really say, oh, wow, we are matching the real needs of the patient in the writing of the protocol of this trial, right? So hopefully this one gives you an idea on how interviewing patients can help on designing a clinical protocol that is very fit for purpose in terms of patient insights and needs, or in this case, unmet needs. I'm going to explain you a secondary case. Again, and sorry about that, it is a pharma example. So far, we haven't been able to find, at least on my area of consultancy, I haven't been able to find yet a case in MedTech, but I'm sure that this is one of the exercises that will help MedTech companies to start working on this sense. So if you please move to the next slide, I'm going to explain you about another business case. And this one is about something very, very subjective, let me say. And I'm saying subjective because you will see now what happened when you're developing research in subjective topics. This subjective topic was called pain, but a very specific pain. It is a pain induced by chemotherapy, that it happens to patients after the chemotherapy, but it is called peripheral pain, meaning that this pain happens in hands and in feet. So this client of us, in this case, it was a pharmaceutical company, and we assisting them in testing with patients its clinical trial protocol for this specific type of pain. That happened in the United States and in France as well, but in a different format than the one that I explained you before. In this case, we didn't interview patients as for what we call it market research. What we did is we put together a new methodology that is called Patient Advisory Board. So we put together a group of 8 patients in the US and 8 patients in France, both suffering about the disease. We prepared a whole discussion guide of every single topic that we wanted to check about the protocol of the trial, which was a protocol with a so-called phase 2 clinical trial. So the client was entering into the second phase of the research process, where is the time when you start researching with patients. Patients meaning suffering from the disease, because during phase 1, you have healthy people. So we wanted to understand every insight and proposed actions from those patients about that protocol. We wanted to really understand if the protocol endpoints were the right one for them, if the type of patient-reported outcomes that we were planning to collect were the ones that would matching their needs. Also, we wanted to understand basically their pain perception. What was pain for them? Because as I told you, this was all about the subjective topic called pain. And again, I tell you what happened, very interesting. In research, you have to use validated scales when you want to assess one specific item. So you want to assess pain, you have to go and use the validated scales on pain. And when we asked it to those patients if they had pain, they told us, nope, I do not have pain. I do have pins and needles, and I also have numbness, but I don't have pain. Wow, that was really interesting for us, because we realized that by using those scales, if we were asking patients if they were suffering pain, the result and the outcomes of the trial was very dangerous, because they could just respond, nope, I do not have. because the way they were interpreting pain, it was very different than the way that the pain was described in the validated scale. So what did we and our client understood from that advisory board with real patients was that unless we were able to explain to the principal investigators of the clinical trial that these patients understand or understood pain differently, they could fail at the time of collecting the outcomes. And that is critical. Also, these patients helped us a lot on reshaping the protocol based on their needs, finally contributing to the trial success in terms of not just understanding the scales, but also in terms of recruitment and retention of patients, as well as in terms of time to launch. This is my second case. I don't have another third case because we thought that these two can give you a good picture of the amount of different things that you can do when you work with patients in research is really, it's really amazing. We're just starting this journey. I can tell you because I've been 25 years in pharmaceutical companies, MedTech companies, and that is very unusual. So we all depend on you and on us on making this happen more and more. And maybe in some years we won't have to talk about this anymore, because definitely there will be a whole combination of elements that will make possible that patients participate fully embedded in the clinical research process.